Thank you to David and the IIBA for having us today. This is the 6th of our webinars with the IIBA, and we are delighted to be back once again and look forward to putting plans in place for next year. So I'm Sarah O'Callaghan. I'm a managing principal at Capco. I'm part of the Scotland leadership team. I'm also the partnership sponsor here in Capco Scotland, working closely with our partnership leads for IIBA, Faye and Moxley. And today we have Martha Ferez, who is a managing principal delivering the session today. Martha is aligned to business consulting as a capability in Capco and also part of our risk practice in the UK as well. So I will leave it to her to introduce herself, but let me say that you are in very safe hands today. The content is fantastic and it will cover what is behavioural science and how it can help business analysts. We'll also explore how individuals make decisions that drive certain behaviours. So I look forward to it myself. And I will hand you over to Martha shortly. But as you can see on the slide, for those of you that don't know Capco, Capco are a global management and technology consultancy dedicated to financial services. So we're very much in and around the tech and business change space in financial services, and we do a lot of thought leadership as well within the industry. We've got over 6,000 people globally, approaching 2,000 people now in the UK, and more relevantly to this group, we have over 300 people in our Scotland office. And you'll see on the slide there that we've had pretty rapid growth for Capco in Scotland over the past 7 years. So it's a very exciting time for Capco. So I'll be facilitating today, as I said, so you'll see me again at the end for some Q&A. So please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A function in Zoom, and we hope to address as many of them as we can. But without further ado, I will hand you over to Martha to take you through today's session.
Thank you very much, Sarah and David, for the introduction. So welcome to today's webinar on behavioral science. The objective of the session is to give you top tips for business analysts to use behavioral science to deliver more successful business transformations. Just to add a little bit more about who I am. Yes, my name is Martha. I'm a managing principal at Capco. I am originally from Mexico, in case you're trying to guess where the accent is from. I studied industrial and systems engineering. Then I went to consulting, always doing change management. And then I have actually worked in the industry, specifically in financial services, where I use skills like change improvement, agile delivery. And recently I discovered behavioral science, and I have dove into it because I feel like it was a missing piece of the puzzle for a successful change transformation. So very excited to share with you today those findings. Right, so let's get into it. My first question is change easy? And this is not a rhetorical question. If you could write on the chat box, yes or no. Excellent. Thank you for your participation. No, I don't think change is easy, but it's inevitable. Very deep. To me, change is not easy. Change is easy? No. Mixed feelings here. Change is not easy, but inevitable as well. No, it's not easy. No exclamation mark. Thank you so much to those who participated. Let's get a bit into that, and you'll understand why I want to open up with this slide. So, yeah, it's not easy, right? As human beings, we like our status quo. It makes us feel safe. It makes us feel like we belong. So if everyone is going with the flow, why on earth would we go against it? But yeah, why on earth do some people go against it? Well, there is novelty to it, right? So in a way, it is exciting to see, oh, things could be different. So that's exciting. It appeals to a part of our brain that is designed to identify, ooh, that's new, that could be exciting. But for other people that could go, well, yeah, sure, I could be different, but that's risky. What? There's like safety in numbers. So if everyone is going in that direction, why would I go in the opposite direction? And some people could even think that it's actually unnecessary. So why bother trying to put all this effort to go against the flow? Things have happened this way for many years for a reason. Why bother? But what I'm trying to highlight here is why behavioral science is important for this conversation. We all deal with change. And as I mentioned, I studied engineering. My parents are engineers. So I love this like definition in one line. What is behavioral science? How and why people make decisions. Because of my upbringing and my academic background, I thought that people would only make decisions based on rationale, logic. So if I was to explain to them, listen, here's my business case of why we should change. I have come up with a plan. It will deliver these benefits. Let's change. And in my personal experience, I don't know how you feel, regardless of my very logical explanation and assessment and plan, sometimes people refuse to change. So I used to find that very frustrating until I discovered behavioral science. So as mentioned, it's about how and why people make decisions. And that is sometimes unconscious. Sometimes it's conscious, maybe when it's a rational decision. But the unconscious aspect of it is massive. Our brain is also structured to make decisions based on emotion and impulse. And that is deeply wired into our brain from caveman years. So it's sometimes a matter of survival. So it's just a reaction that no logic could convince you to act differently. So this is why I'm super excited to present to you how behavioral science could help you as business analysts deliver change successfully. If you're not familiar with it, it's actually quite a wide term. We call it an umbrella term because it covers a number of disciplines that helps us understand how people behave the way they do. And to achieve that, it's a combination of these disciplines in bullet point number 2. So as I mentioned, in economics, like classical economics, we would think that we're logical, supply, demand. So if one goes up, the other one goes down. If the price goes up, people don't buy things. But in reality, the price went up and I still want to buy it. Why? Because my friend is buying it and I want to fit in. Or maybe because I've always bought it. So it's like deeply engraved into my mind to do this. It's a routine. So it considers all of that and it makes it fascinating to understand what is a conscious or an unconscious decision and how maybe we can nudge people in a different direction without manipulating them, just making them aware of how are they making that decision. So hopefully that was a good introduction of what is behavioral science. And now let's go into the applications. So we're all consultants, business analysts. I believe that we mostly face 3 types of challenges: methodology challenges, people challenges, and tooling challenges. So question for the group again on the Q&A box. Which one do you encounter most in your day-to-day life? Is it methodology challenges, like using the wrong approach or having to update the steps that you usually follow? Is it people related, or is it tooling, not having the right technology? People, Kasia, thank you so much for contributing. Any other views? People challenges, excellent. There's a reason why people dial into this call. They're not mutually exclusive, they're actually related. So yes, of course, if you want to change the methodology, you need to bring the people together. That's a great point. Methodology, okay, all 3. Yeah, so that's what I would like to bring to the table here. It is very difficult to assess change from each type of challenge. Every single project we engage with will usually have a combination of this, one to more degree and one to a lesser degree. And in my experience as consultants, maybe also as business analysts, we try to solve tooling and methodology issues and we ignore the people problems. And of course, the people problems are there, but because it's complex and difficult to assess and measure, we keep giving methodology and tooling solutions to solve for people problems. However, I'm here to tell you today that if we want to fix people problems from the root, we need people solutions. And it's really nice to see your contributions. It actually aligns with this survey that Capco ran within their BA community in the UK. Thank you to everyone who participated. You can see the results in the word cloud. And let's take a moment to go through them. So fear of failure, unsure vision, indifference, change resistance, that going against the flow, big egos, lack of ownership, change fatigue, undervaluing the project team, unrealistic expectations, assumptions, uncertainty, blame culture. I would actually put all of that under people problems mainly. Of course, there could be elements of technology and methodology. So this slide explains why this talk is relevant to you today. Hopefully you can also relate to the day in a life business analyst, what is necessary. And all of that has loads of people solutions, I would say, collaborating, facilitating, engaging. And what do we all have in common? People. So we need to get better at understanding people so we can help each other on this journey. So that's what the tips today are about. Just before we go into the tips, just to clarify, if someone is still like, okay, but what are people problems, Martha? Here are a few examples. So lack of clarity, silo mentality, lack of purpose, change fatigue. I would class those as people problems that don't actually fit into a methodology or a tooling problem. So what are the people solutions? Well, behavioral science can deliver well-being and improve performance, but how? Through this people solution. So having customer focus, having empathy, innovating, sharing knowledge. And what do we do with that now that we're aware of these people solutions? Well, we need to embed them into the mindset that will spill over positive behaviors that we then need to embed into the organization's DNA. That's difficult, right? I'm now talking about creating the right culture for it. And as I mentioned, in order for that to happen, we need the people solutions in order to solve these people problems. That's easier said than done, right? Our mind is quite complex. So how could we actually do it? If we have this mental bias, and I know that bias has a negative connotation, many people associate bias with like bad things like, oh, racism. But actually bias is just a mental shortcut. It's a sign of evolution of our brain managing to come to a decision faster, but making some assumptions that not always apply. So if we engage logic, we would be able to say, that assumption doesn't apply. So my bias or mental shortcut doesn't apply. And it could be something simple like status quo bias, like I'm biased to not mess with the system and not change it, or I'm biased to follow the herd because I want to fit in. So they're not bad things, they're survival things, but we need to be aware of them. And sometimes they could act as a change barrier. Sometimes we don't know that it's acting as a change barrier. So hopefully as I'm saying this, everything is clicking. You're like, yeah, of course, that happens all the time, but it was not conscious. So by making it conscious, we're able to become more proficient at it. And also motivation levers. Sometimes it could be something positive. If we want to innovate and we have a group of people that are innovators, maybe finding your home in that group, that would be a motivation because we have this bias of wanting to fit. Behavioral science, I would like you to think of it applied to change management. So it's not really just a methodology, it's actually an adaptive process. And it's complex because it requires emotional management and everyone has different emotions based on their past experiences. And it's a continuous learning curve and everyone will go through it at a different speed. So this is why the application of behavioral science could be complex, but the benefits, hopefully from the understanding of how much of our day-to-day involves people problems could be immense. Because maybe it won't fix it from the beginning, from the root, but it would definitely be a step in the right direction. So I think this psychological layer to your day-to-day work would make a difference. Let's check if you agree at the end after I share the 6 lessons learned. Let's start with the first one. Number 1, communicate the vision of why transformation is necessary to instill a sense of purpose. Let me pick on the last word of that lesson, purpose. Do you know that purpose is actually a key factor of happiness? If you're interested on that, I just read a book from Paul Dolan, Happiness by Design, and he actually says that in order to be happy, there's 2 dimensions, either purpose or pleasure. So if the day-to-day at work is not always pleasurable, why do we do it? It's because we find the sense of purpose. We want to feel like we're building something, creating something, making a difference, doing something good for our community, for our clients. So this is why this is so powerful. If we don't communicate such vision, people don't know, our colleagues don't know, our clients don't know, why are we having this conversation? Like, why do we need to gather requirements? Why do we need to build something? Why are we doing an analysis? And for me, that changes the vibe of the conversation, because it's not just we need to do this now, is that is where we're going. We're taking a step in the right direction. And if we don't share that vision, people might not be driven to action. Like the behavior that they will show is not engaging with that change. And that's what behavioral science is about. So a word of wisdom, because of the importance of that vision, whenever it is communicated, we need to make sure that it is a positive one. Who would like to walk towards a goal that people don't believe in? So it has to align with people's values. So it has to be closely related to the culture. And additionally, it has to be realistic. So if we paint a vision of the future that feels unattainable, maybe it would sound good. But if people just don't see how it would be possible to make it a reality, people would disengage. So this is a very powerful tip, but if the vision is not thought through and aligned to the culture, it would have the opposite effect. It will create disengagement, and it won't create the purpose. So it is very important to stop and think, where are we going? And sharing that, and with a shared objective, walk in the right direction. So that becomes basically our North Star going forward. So that was tip number one. I know that in reality, we're thrown in the deep end and we're asked to act tactically. But when we stop and go, wait, what problem are we actually trying to solve here? It's good to step back, analyze that, come to a mutual understanding, communicating, and have checkpoints. Like, it is okay for the vision to change at some point, but hopefully it's so wide and well aligned with the values of the organization that it will stand for a long time. A vision has to be long term, but if it's wrong, it is definitely worth stopping and reviewing it. Now, lesson number 2. Embed psychological safety to create a virtuous cycle to enhance risk management. Psychological safety. I don't know if everyone is familiar with that term, but it's about creating an environment where people feel like they can speak up. In my personal experience, I feel that when we talk about psychological safety, there's a big emphasis on everyone should be speaking up. But the bigger thing for me is who is listening. So when someone speaks up, if people feel like they were not actually listened, they're not going to speak up again. And how do you show someone that you have actually listened as a colleague or as a line manager, as a client, as a consultant, and more importantly today, as a business analyst? Well, first off, you thank that person for actually speaking up. That's how you start with the psychological safety. And you agree to take action and let them know what you're going to do with that information. Because if they're speaking up to you, it's because they're expecting some help. You can also clarify, and then you can differentiate, okay, you just wanted to be heard, but you don't want me to take any action. But if they're expecting you to take some action, you have to come back to them. And it could be like, sorry, I escalated that, and this is not a priority at the moment, so we're going to put it on hold. Or thank you, this is actually high priority for everyone, and this is how we're taking action. The other aspect that I want to highlight here is we say speak up if there's a psychological safety, but no one ever thinks about the receiving end. So if the way that we speak up comes across as maybe we're attacking the person, they're going to get defensive. So we have to be careful when we speak up to be empathic and understand how our words would land on the other side. And basically, if there's psychological safety, we're able just to have a conversation. It doesn't have to be a debate. It's simply two people speaking about something that's in their mind that they think it's relevant for discussion, so they think it could make a difference. It could have even feed into the vision. So this is why this is actually fitting into purpose. And now I want to explain two types of cycles. I don't know if you're familiar with virtuous psychological safety and vicious psychological safety. So if there's no psychological safety, it becomes vicious. So people don't speak up, we don't know what's wrong, we are not aware of what we could improve, and therefore we don't innovate, we stagnate. But it could be virtuous. If we have the right environment and people speak up, then they have a sense of purpose of what I think actually matters, and people listen and it makes a difference. So there's a new control in order to make sure that this doesn't go wrong again, or there's a better control to make sure that there's less risk in the future. So the odds of something going wrong is even lower. And it could be positive or negative. It could be, this could be better, or it could be, this actually went wrong. Let's try to think how to make it better. But if people are listening, then we go into an environment of continuous improvement and continuous learning. And that's how we get a high-performing organization. But I hope you can see the behavioral science layer on top of this, how it is psychological, because different people, based on their past experiences and the emotion of the moment that changes for everyone, we're humans, would be different. So we need to communicate in order to do the best thing at a given time for a specific person and for the specific situation. Lesson number 3, address cognitive bias via behavioral nudges to reduce the perception of risk. So I spent some time before explaining bias or cognitive bias, and I explained that it's not a bad thing, it's just engraved in our brain certain ways of working. So maybe that has created pathways in our brain that create rituals. And when we're asking people to change, like maybe they understand it in principle, but because they're stuck in their ways and they have done things like that for a long time, it would be difficult for them to get over it. So how can behavioral science help with that? Well, we have nudges. The definition of a nudge is just highlighting a different way of working without making someone do it. It's 100% their choice, but we give them options in order to take the action that the company would like them to take at a given point in time. So simple things like, we would like you to submit timetables on time. So nudge, an email saying, your timetable is due today. You have a few hours to submit it. So maybe at that time, I was used to focusing intensely in something, but because I've been nudged, I would act differently. And we can do that in more difficult circumstances. So for instance, if we want to nudge our client to have more structured conversations, we can nudge them by stating from the beginning, the purpose of today's workshop is to achieve that, and maybe reminding them halfway through the meeting and at the end, highlighting what was actually achieved. And this actually reduces the perception of risk because it helps us manage expectations, and human beings is really not the actual risk that influences their behavior, but their perception of risk. So if we have the right nudges in place in order to give comfort to people about the change that's happening, then they would be driven to action. Lesson number 4, praise the right behaviors to reinforce and sustain those traits among employees. So praising, another word for praising is rewarding. And if we go into the many disciplines that behavioral science covers, we have neuroscience. I don't know if you're aware, but our brain releases dopamine, and that makes us feel good. And our brain does that when they're anticipating our reward. So if the behaviors that we reward are the behaviors that we're promoting. So if we're rewarding the wrong behaviors, we're promoting the wrong behaviors. So people get accustomed to that dopamine hit. And when we step up and go, okay, so we have this key performance indicator, we've been rewarding people, but that is actually driving a behavior that is not in line with our culture, that needs to be looked at. So think about the type of praise that you give in what scenarios. I know that it's sometimes difficult to praise the right behaviors, because if someone acts with a behavior that is not ideal, you might just go, okay, I'm not going to say anything. And that could be seen of, okay, so you're supporting that behavior, and therefore that will carry on. And when I say praise, reward, it's not just financial reward. As human beings, just saying thank you, just making someone feel like what they did actually added value goes a long way. Of course, we would like bonuses, etc. But I want to highlight here that simply saying to your team, your clients at the end of the meeting, thank you, that was actually really helpful. It's helping us take a step in the right direction. I appreciate the pre-work that you did. It made things flow more easily. Thank you for reviewing the requirements on time. I can now push them to production without having any delays because we were actually on the critical path. So this made a huge difference. So I do want to highlight this one because it could cost nothing, but also it goes back to having the psychological safety to speak up. So it's two ways, right? The carrot and the stick. I am focusing here on the carrot, but also let's take a moment to realize that also there's a stick. And that's something that needs to be looked at whenever the right behaviors are not being rewarded. That is something that is worth looking at. And maybe you're thinking that's over my pay grade, but I do think that there are actions we can take in our everyday life as business analysts with your team, with your line manager, with your client that would actually make a difference. So ask yourself this question, like, did I praise the right behaviors today? Some people find it easier to praise rather than highlight. That was actually not the right behavior. So let's start with the positive. I think that's easier. So that's the focus of this lesson, number 4. Number 5, practice makes perfect. A one-off theoretical training won't embed key knowledge. So I'm going to start here with the following quote. Knowledge is not understanding. First time I heard that, knowledge is not understanding, it took me a moment for it to sink in. So what I'm trying to say here is that knowledge could be theoretical training, right? Like an online course, reading a book, someone telling you what to do. But that is very different to understanding it, embedding it, getting it to become who you are. And that's why we selected this picture, actually. I think sports are a great example. So a tennis player could read about all the technique, about how to serve. But it isn't until he gets out in the court, he feels the ball, he feels the racket, he feels like the court, actually. He feels the sun, the angle, the clouds, the weather, like the clothes he's wearing, or she. And that's actually when you start understanding what are all the different factors that are affecting. And then you start practicing. So again, going back to neuroscience, we don't embed new knowledge just by reading it once or doing it once. Practice makes perfect. So research shows that it takes about 21 days to embed a new way of working. And that requires having practiced that every single day. It's not like just 1 hour or just 1 week. So I want to highlight this as a lesson because many times we think that, oh, I told the client that this was the approach that we were taking, or someone tells us going forward, this is how you should be acting, or here's some feedback in order for your change requests or your user stories to be even better. So you could have heard it, but it takes some time for it to actually be embedded so you can understand all the different flavors of the affecting factors. And sometimes I know we worked in a fast-paced world. I feel like this slips through the cracks, and it goes back to the people problem of lack of clarity or fear of change. If someone has told me in the past, just do this, and it hasn't been delivered, maybe it's not coming from a bad place. It's simply, I haven't had enough time to practice under all the different circumstances. So I think it's something we should bear in mind when we're receiving feedback or new guidance or learning about a new process or a new technology or how to interact with new team members, but also when we're asking someone else to do something different, to change. So change takes time, especially when we already have embedded routines that are deeply rooted into the brain pods that we have actually developed through many, many years. So be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and practice. Practice makes perfect. Finally, lesson number 6. Leaders need to model the change to help others visualize the future. This, for me, goes back to the people problem of lack of clarity. So it's not enough to tell someone, this is how I would like you to act, or please speak up next time, or please make sure that in the next client meeting, you give constructive feedback whilst keeping them engaged. So again, knowledge is not understanding. And if we don't see a path on how that looks like, it's very difficult for people to embrace that type of change. That's when leadership becomes very important. So it's like that old jargon of, if not only talk the talk, you need to walk the walk. So I like this picture, like climb that mountain. It's like, yeah, sure. Like I don't see a path, like there's no ladder. It's like, okay, it's possible. Let me show you. And then if you ever climb, like that is actually super helpful. Like if you've done it, it's like you don't know what rock is safe. Like you just see like millions of possibilities, and an experienced person goes like, this rock is safe, that one's wobbly, that one is okay for you to have a rest. So it's super helpful to have like a Sherpa that can guide you. That's why it's important to have mentors. That's why it's important to have buddies. And again, if we live in this fast-paced environment where we just asked to do something and move on, it goes back to that people problem. Like sometimes it's just not clear, or maybe I failed in the past because I grabbed that specific rock and it was not steady and I fell, and now I have this bad memory and this bad feeling. So how could we get over it using behavioral science? Like, let's get good leaders to show us the way. So I hope that you have enjoyed these 6 top tips. I'm looking forward to your questions. Before we get into that, we have a poll. Hopefully you can see it popping up on your screen. So I would like you to answer the following question. So here we have the pictures that represent every single top tip that I gave you. So let's focus on the first 2. Remember, lesson number 1, communicate the vision, and lesson number 2, psychological safety. The question, in one word, how could we summarize those 2 top tips? Number 1, communicate the vision. Number 2, psychological safety. Is it purpose? Is it bias? Or is it methodology?
Okay, going to end the poll now, and you should see the results.
Drum roll. The winner is purpose, 76%. And the answer is purpose. Well done. Yes, that's where I would categorize both of them. One, communicating the vision, as I explained. If we agree with that vision, it gives us a purpose for the long term. And psychological safety, if we embed that psychological safety, we give a purpose to people because they know that their opinion matters and it would make a difference, and it gives their role a purpose within the organization. Shall we go for question number 2? So that one includes the next 2 lessons learned. So number 3, address bias via behavioral nudges. And the other one is recognize the right behaviors. So it's those 2 pictures, if you remember. So praising the right behaviors and addressing bias using nudges. Again, go with your gut feeling. Is it tooling, motivation, or behavior? Drum roll. And the winner is behavior. Okay, with 63%, motivation 31%, and tooling 6%. Let's see, what was the answer? It was actually motivation. Of course, this is behavioral science, so okay, I can see how I tricked you by saying behavior. But the reason why I chose motivation to summarize those 2 top tips is because We are motivating people to take action by nudging them. We could also gamify the situation and see how people compare to other teams, but that is answering the question, how do I motivate a team externally to embrace new behaviors that align to the change transformation? And I would put under the same category, recognizing the right behaviors, because if I don't recognize the right behaviors, I'm not motivating people to follow the right behaviors. So that's why I chose that word. Hopefully this helps for the learnings to crystallize. We have two more. I couldn't put the last two under only one word. So we have one word for tip number 5, which was practice makes perfect. Do we think innovation sums it up? Would it be psychology or would it be training? Again, this is one word to summarize. Practice makes perfect. Or in other words, knowledge is not understanding. The winner is training, 76%. And that answer is correct. It's not popping up. There we go. Yes, so training, like if you don't train, you won't embed it into the brain path, and it won't become a ritual and it won't become second nature. So if we want to become great at the new change methodology, using the new tool, or how to interact with people, we need to practice, we need to train for it, we need to get out in the field, have firsthand experience under as many different scenarios. And last question for the trivia, that regards the tip number 6, which is modeling change to visualize the path. Do you think that regards leadership, well-being, or data? And here we have the answers. 85% voted for leadership, and that is correct. I do think a sign of leadership is not just saying where people should go, is role modeling where people should go, how should they behave. So if you're planning on becoming a leader, show people the right behaviors. This is how you structure a conversation. This is how you deliver feedback with psychological safety, making people know that they're important to the team, that they're delivering in line with our purpose, and that they're important. So show us the way if you want to be a leader. Okay, so with that, we come to the end of the webinar. I would like to highlight that the key takeaway is that technology is not the future. The future is psychological, not technological. So use behavioral science as a new tool in your business analysis toolbox. I really think that it can be the cherry on top of your great day-to-day job as a business analyst, to deliver the change, to embed it, to engage people, to take away all these people problems of people being afraid of change, people wanting to work in silos, not feeling part of the team, not having clarity, being burnt out. We do need to bring this people aspect to the center of our change transformations. So I'm going to leave you with that as my closing remarks, and I'm looking forward to discussing your questions. I'll hand over to Sarah so she can pick her favorites or most voted.
What was that?
Or the most voted ones. Up to you.
Yeah, I will start with the most upvotes. But firstly, thank you, Martha, for that. That was absolutely fantastic. So intriguing. I have a question myself for you, which I will leave till the end. I will first make sure that we get through all of the questions that have been submitted. So thank you to those that have submitted. Feel free, there's still some time if anybody else wants to submit a question. Just add it to the Q&A function. But the first one I'll start with, Martha, which is the top of our upvotes, which is, what would you advise a BA to do if they are keen to apply behavioral science to their daily job?
That's an excellent question. Practical. We can hit the ground running tomorrow or today with behavioral science. Well, I would say maybe start assessing what are the people problems in your specific line of work, because again, the people problems vary greatly by the culture that you're currently experiencing, the type of role, and also the other people in your team. So that's what I would advise. First, analyze what are the people problems. So if you identify there is lack of clarity, you can use behavioral science to assess, okay, why are people not clear on this? Are the steps not easy? Human beings, they follow the path of least resistance. So if it's very convoluted, maybe that's why it's not clear and that's why they're not following it. Another option could be, well, it's just not clear and no one's clear. So even if I try to come up with like simple steps, I really don't know how to make this into a methodology. So then look at the leader that requested that and go by top tip number 6, which is, could you please model the way forward? Because we're just not clear on how to proceed. But maybe you'll find something different, like fear to change. And you could go, okay, so why do we have that problem? Like, what has failed in the past that has created these bad memories and these bad emotions that are acting as barriers for change? So then you could understand that and then address the feeling, address the emotion. That's part of the people solutions. Be empathic and then show people how things could be different. So I'm sorry I don't have a blanket approach. I think it would be wrong for me just to answer that with a blanket answer. The answer is first identify the people problems, then identify the people solutions and ask for help. Like, you should not be doing this alone. Find the crowd. Hopefully some people from this call would be inspired. And you're also very welcome to reach out if you ever get stuck.
Brilliant, very comprehensive answer, Martha, so thank you. The next question I'm going to ask is actually now top of the upvotes, which is, purpose can mean different things to different people. How do you know purpose hits the spot for a sponsor as well as all stakeholder groups?
That's an excellent question. And I agree. And the answer is, you cannot just know, like, you need to check. So you can make a proposal, but if we look at what grand organizations have done, most of them have gone through this journey because purpose is so important. And this actually becomes a change initiative on their own. So working with top leadership, defining what's the purpose of the organization, engaging with their people from different areas at different levels, from different geographies, making sure it resonates for everyone. And again, I would be massively like underplaying this question if I just gave you an answer, like, this is how you know. It cannot be in your head. You need to put it out there. Every answer, there's like 3 different layers. The answer that you think, the answer that your team thinks, and the answer that your supervisor thinks. So make sure you gather data from all 3 groups before progressing. And this is a very important thing. Maybe speak with your leadership team if you don't think that the organization actually has a purpose, because everything should come from the purpose. So if that is missing, that is needed. And if that's outdated, that needs reviewing. So it would be great if you're passionate on this topic for you to champion this initiative. It would have huge impact. I'll leave it there. Great question.
Brilliant. So another one that's quite popular is, what is the best way to increase psychological safety in a meeting when one participant is creating an unsafe environment by their behavior?
Again, that's a great question. And it makes me realize that I am not alone. Like, this is a problem across the industry. So this could go down to your personal style. My style would be, I always try to go to that person first, because it is very easy to go, you're the problem of psychological safety. But not always they're doing it on purpose. Again, not always our behavior is led by conscious, rational process. So if you feel like you can have that conversation with that person, again, being empathic, you could raise it separately after the meeting. Try not that much time to go by, because then people forget what was in their head. So try to address it immediately if you feel comfortable, and speak with them and go like, hi, I noticed and start objectively. That's the best way to have the conversation. I noticed you said that. I noticed that reaction. That made me, so speak from yourself, because it feels weird when people go, everyone was saying you're killing psychological safety. So speak from your perspective. Like, it made me feel like after that, I couldn't say anything or challenge anything or propose any other idea in order to speak up. Are you aware of this? And then that would be interesting, right? So if they say, no, I thought I was just being confident, that's a different conversation. But if they say, yes, the team needs to know it's not their place for them to be speaking up, then you know what people problem you're dealing with. And there's different ways in order to address it, if that's where it lands. You could say, okay, but are you aware of the benefits of people actually speaking up? And you can explain psychological safety virtuous cycle. Maybe that lands, and maybe that person will change their behavior in the future. If they don't, then it would be worth escalating and speaking with someone, their mentor, their coach, or even flagging it at the next meeting as a team. Like, we strongly believe that this should be heard and we're really concerned, or we think it's a great idea. So again, look at the colleagues and go, okay, guys, is it just me? Or do we all agree? Like, I'm also open, I take feedback. I have psychological safety for you to speak up about my idea. So those are the key things I would ask. Do you want to add anything, Sarah?
What was that?
I was wondering if you wanted to add something as well.
No, I was just going to say, just touch on what you said. I do think, what helps in these situations is when you talk about how it made you feel. So the person can understand your point of view. I think that makes it a lot more easier to deal with in that sort of scenario. That's all I was going to say. Now, there are quite a few more questions. So maybe this one, Martha, could be a quick answer, because it's about recommended books. But any books on behavioural science you particularly recommend for a generalist business analyst?
Yes. Well, the standard one is Nudge. That's a great one to start with. The classical one is Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. But there are some newer ones. I personally really like Switch. So that has very practical examples that I think would be relevant for business analysts.
Brilliant. Hopefully people caught those names. If not, I'm sure we can send out a list.
Yeah. I'll send a list of recommended books when we send out the deck. What about that?
Yeah, we can share that with the IIBA. Fantastic. So I'm jumping around a little bit. There's an interesting one here. What's your top technique to overcome change fatigue?
So again, I wouldn't call it a technique, because then we're solving people problems with methodology solutions. But I think I touched on it already. It would be understanding what's leading to that change fatigue. And of course, it's usually change happening too often, but it's understanding, why is leadership doing that? Like, why did the first initiative didn't land, or why didn't it work? What is the second one addressing that the first one didn't? So kind of crystallizing and maybe articulating to leadership, like, first initiative did that, second initiative tried to do exactly the same, third initiative just changed that, and let's step back. The root cause of the problem is this, and it hasn't been addressed. So in order to address change fatigue, it would be like, stop changing and have some continuity that drives purpose. And maybe in the meantime, communicate to thought leadership, like, okay, if this is not addressing the question, can we put it on hold? Because people are doing it on the side of their decks. So give them a bit of a breather. And then when we come back, we at least build some trust, like, okay, we heard that you're fatigued. We addressed it by putting it on hold, and we're coming back with a more thought through strategic solution. And we hope that will stop start.
Brilliant. Okay, so unfortunately, I don't think we've got any more time for questions to ensure that we end on the hour. But again, Martha, thank you so much. There were more questions. We did get through most of them, and I did try to pick the ones that had the most upvotes. So hopefully everybody on the line we've answered, or Martha has answered your questions well. I guess that concludes the Q&A and the session. Thank you all for joining. We hope you found the content engaging and relevant to you. It was great to see the interaction throughout, so thank you for that. It always makes things easier when we have an engaging audience. And if you do want to get in touch, of course, then reach out to myself or Martha or anyone on the Capco team. And just a reminder, I think it was posted in the chat I saw during the session, but a reminder to take a look at Martha's article on the topic as well, which is fantastic. So thank you again, David and the IIB, for having us today, and we look forward to the next one.
Yeah, just like to echo the thanks to Martha for an excellent session. We will get the slide deck, answers, list of books, and the recording up on the IIBA past events site as soon as we possibly can, but you'll need to give us a couple of days to do that. Also, for those who are members, please keep your eyes on the future events pages. With the next 2 events in Edinburgh for our end of year will be up there shortly. So yeah, thanks everybody. Have a fantastic day. We look forward to seeing you hopefully face to face in November.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.